Alright, so you want to make a multiplayer game where people can get together and race each other. You have a couple of different options in terms of how to organize it. You could use a server-based netcode structure, or you could use peer-to-peer netcode. Now, which one has benefits and downsides? So let's say in this game there are 4 players. Each and every one of those players connects to the server. The server runs the game instance. Now, the game instance on the server doesn't need to have everything that the clients have. It doesn't need to manage all the audio and the graphics. It doesn't. It only needs to know the position of everything in the world at the bare minimum. Okay, now the specifics are beyond this short video, but everybody talks to the server. Okay, and the server is the final authority on everything. So if you are shot around the corner, but the server says, hey, player 1 is the one who deserves to take the kill, and you're player 2 and you are shot around the corner, then the server is the one that communicates to all the players or clients that, hey, player 2 got shot around the server and it was a skill issue. He peaked. There are a couple of caveats, right? Because when there is a single server handling everyone, the reason why this server-based netcode is so good is because if player 1 has 30 ms, player 2 has 250 ms, 3 has 110 and 60, having the server decide on what actually happened is beneficial, because now the player with the best connection to the server has the best experience. And if you're playing at 30 ms, you're probably having fun. 250, I have no idea what you're doing on this region server. 110, it's not the greatest, but you can play, and depending on the game. And 60 ms is like a middle ground of, it's not perfect, but you won't notice any hitches. At 110 you start to notice. At 240, why are you here? Okay, why are you here? Now this is like the super brief overview of how that works. Now on the other hand, peer-to-peer netcode is a little bit different. Now with peer-to-peer netcode, essentially, player 1 and player 2 talk to each other directly. Now it does say serverless, but in reality there is no totally serverless netcode, because in reality player 1 could secretly be the server with player 2 actually being the client, but there are ways to inject some light amount of input lag so that player 1 feels like they still have the same experience. So let's say there's 100 milliseconds in between these two of ping. You can make it so that player 1 has an input lag of like 25 milliseconds, okay, to kind of equalize their inputs if that's needed. There's also the use of rollback to autocorrect in case there's a discrepancy between inputs. But having these simple illustrations doesn't really show the differences well enough. Let's look at it in terms of distance. Alright, so player 1 and player 2 are 1,000 kilometers apart. That's about 600 miles, right? So keep in mind, for the game to work smoothly, a signal has to travel from where player 1 is to where player 2 is. So we can let them connect to each other peer-to-peer. And just for argument's sake, let's say that for every 1,000 kilometers, there's only 10 milliseconds of input lag, okay? So at 1,000 kilometers, player 1 and player 2 will have 10 milliseconds in between each other if we use peer-to-peer networking. But let's increase that distance. So let's say now we're dealing with 10,000 kilometers and the packet needs to go from player 1 to player 2 and then from player 2 back to player 1. You're looking at about 200 ms, and you might say, hey, the math isn't adding up. No, the reason why the farther you go, the worse it gets per kilometer is because when you travel large distances, you start covering countries. So this is a basic map of the world, right? So the more distance you cover, the more countries and different servers your signal has to pass through, and each one adds a little bit more lag. So now we're dealing at 10,000 kilometers. If we connect them directly, it's 200 ms. But if we add a server, so now we add in a server, and all of a sudden, instead of doing a 200 ms round trip, it's 100 ms to one player and 100 ms to the other player. And that's why we really love server-based netcode, especially for like multiplayer games. It's just that good. And the more players you add, okay, so let's say you have like player 2, you have player 3, you have player 4, you have 30 players on. At that point you need a server, because the more players, the more calculating overhead there will be for the peer server if we use peer-to-peer. But if the game allows it, like let's say a fighting game or a 1v1 strategy game, peer-to-peer is always better, because the distance in between player 1 and 2 is so short that adding in a server would actually introduce latency into the system.